Some More Good News Season 2 is all about people doing good through following their passions, good for their own souls and for others. I'm Kate Chericello, and welcome to today's episode. Let's spread a little more goodness in the world. All right, today's guest is Patrick Thornton, and he is just such a great example of following your passions, even when it means not necessarily choosing the comfortable factor or the easy option along the way, but constantly seeking out new opportunities to grow and be challenged and, again, follow his passions. Because of this, Patrick has a very interesting journey since we met over a decade ago now. It doesn't seem like it was that long, but it was. And I'll let him tell us more about it all. But first of all, just thank you so much for being here, Patrick.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I am so glad you thought of me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Patrick. All right, so the first question, who are you and what do you do in your own words?
Hi, so I'm Patrick Thornton, and I am, in the simplest terms, a writer and editor. I live in Chicago, and so for my business, I work as a freelance writer. I work a lot with other small businesses and entrepreneurs, not unlike myself, creating web content and helping them grow their businesses. I worked with photographers, accountants, lawyers, life coaches, a really wide array of folks. It's a great job for someone like me who gets bored really easily because I'm always learning something new. And then in my creative practice, I have a degree in creative writing, which was something I never expected to do. I went to college for arts administration, which I do some of, but it's not my main gig. And so in my creative practice, I do creative nonfiction, so like essay and memoir style writing. And then I've also gotten into poetry, which was something, again, I never thought I would do or even be interested in doing. So I have a couple of pieces coming out next month that I'm excited about. And then on the editing side, I'm the managing editor of the online journal and small press Ghost Proposal. I came on in 2016. My friend Naomi Washer founded it in 2012, our first semester of grad school. And we do 2 online issues a year. And then we also started a small press side. And so we publish between 2 and 3 chapbooks, which chapbooks are just small, handbound, limited edition books from emerging artists, which is a great way to meet new folks and just see the wealth of writing that's out there that maybe gets overlooked by more mainstream publishers. And I've also started working with clients on editing their own manuscripts, which I would love to do more of. One of my clients, they published their first book last spring that I helped them edit, which was really exciting, just to kind of be somebody's cheerleader and help them on that journey. So that's in the very bare bone terms, like you said. Like I've had pretty eclectic career path, but those are my main focuses in my work and life right now.
So you're not busy at all?
No, never. I have tons, just lounge around all day.
Wow. That is a lot of different jobs. I guess that is what happens with freelancing and following those passions. It leads you in a lot of different doors opening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I stalked Patrick online, of course, and you have to check out some of his writings. It's everything from Victorian era hygiene to paranormal activity to, I saw something about Judy Garland. So just amazing. So you had mentioned, the journey. I would love to hear more about how you got to where you are today, how following what you loved brought you here, and just any insight on that path.
Sure. Well, I always think about a relative of mine. She had a great metaphor talking about life. She would talk about the fan of destiny and how your life kind of branches out like a fan, and you go out on the different edges, and if something's not working out, you can kind of redirect. But after a certain amount of time, it's you can only get over so far. And it's this very linear process where I feel like my metaphor would be and like a bunch of pipe cleaners that somebody mashed together and then put in a drawer for 20 years and then like dumped out on the floor. And it's like, just let's just see what happens. Like, I feel like that's kind of my metaphor. So first of
I
all,
didn't see that coming.
okay. First of all, I never ever thought I'd be a writer. I was a kid who didn't like to read. I almost got held back a grade because I couldn't learn how to read. I started writing a little bit in high school, but again, it was just like a hobby, and something I did every now and then. It wasn't something I really started thinking about until towards like the end of undergrad. Like I said, my degree was in arts admin. I was interested in development and grant writing. So I thought like that's kind of how my writing life would come out. And then, I graduated in 2010. We were still recovering from a recession. So I really feel for everybody graduating from college right now. And my after college plans just totally fell through, and I didn't know really what to do, but it's like, well, I know I'm a good student. So while I was living with my parents, I started taking some graduate courses in English at a local university. And I was in a freshman comp or first year comp class, and the professor had said to me, he's like, I'm old and I'm tenured, so I can get away with telling you this, but I think maybe you should drop out of this program and go for an MFA. And it was something I had been thinking about, but you just didn't think like I had that much to write about or that much to say or that much that anybody would be interested in hearing about. And so I applied to Columbia College Chicago's MFA program. I really liked it because I knew I wanted to do nonfiction, and they were one of the few programs in the country that had a master's just specifically in creative nonfiction. And I got in, we were a cohort of 10. And so I spent 3 years doing that and teaching freshman comp at Columbia, which I love teaching. And I feel like that translates over into my editing and working with clients, and kind of helping other people on their journey and figure out what they want to say. And then after that, I had thought about a PhD. I don't think it would really suit my personality. And so I decided, what am I going to do? And so I started freelancing, and I had a full-time 9-to-5 job and just freelance little by little on the side. And now I freelance part-time, and I do have a job with a nonprofit that's sort of outside of writing and editing as well. So I'm finally, it's like it took 10 years, but I'm finally using my undergrad degree a little bit and my master's degree. So that was, a very, and like I said, I just never thought I would be writing. I thought I would be doing something in arts administration. I had thought about going to school for library science, but I found in writing that I was able to meld sort of all of my interests into one thing. So I learned that, not having it figured out and like not necessarily wanting to do a 9-to-5 or feeling like that didn't work for me wasn't necessarily a bad thing. So that's a somewhat streamlined version of how I got to this point in my life and in my career.
And I love that that example of you went for undergrad, and it wasn't until you said you almost graduated that you felt that you might want to go into writing.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you created this whole career in that didn't even, start until you were 21, 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. And then to circle back to now also work at nonprofit.
Yeah.
Such a great example of that, just letting the changes happen. If a door opens, exploring it. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And I spent like most of my early to mid 20s fighting that because, it's like, that's when you think, everything. And now, and I still want to fight different things where I feel like I don't know how stuff is going to work out, but I've been really fortunate that it has all kind of dovetailed together in really serendipitous ways. But yeah, there was definitely a time. So if anybody watching this is like not feeling that, I understand. And I didn't always listen to the advice of just going with the flow and like waiting to write out things. But for me, it did finally work out even when I fought against it.
Yeah. Amazing. I remember in college thinking 10 years down the line, that sounds so far. How could you, and now it's like back, you're like, oh, all of this has happened since, and we're still able to continue to figure things out. And it's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So next question, talking about the current climate with COVID and the pandemic, how does your world look different now because of the pandemic? What do you see staying, maybe a change for the better, and what can't you wait to get back to once we're a little more open?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you wouldn't think like being a freelance writer, it's like, oh, you just stay inside all day anyway. So in some ways it hasn't changed all that much. I was working from home anyway. The thing that has really changed is just making connections in the writing community. With running Ghost Proposal, we would have launch parties for our chapbooks. We had 2. We were planning to do a third in New York last May, and then the pandemic hit, and we kept putting it off and thinking, at some point it'll be safe to travel and we'll just do a postponed reading. And then like our third book of the year came out, and we still hadn't done the launch party for the second book. So we finally just decided to cut our losses, and we did a Facebook Live event, and it went much better than Naomi and I had expected. And it was a great virtual turnout where when we do our in-person readings, it's, folks who are in the Chicago area or in New York or wherever we would be traveling. So it was great to get a much broader audience. So I'm grateful for that experience, but I do miss just the camaraderie and coming together and listening to people read in person. And also conferences are happening virtually right now. There's a big writing conference every time right around this year, AWP, which I always enjoy going to, and that has been made virtual. And in terms of accessibility issues, I hope things like that continue to be a hybrid of in-person and virtual, and also just the expense of travel. Sometimes just going to a conference is cost prohibitive. So having virtual events, I do think is important, but I really do miss meeting up with friends that I would only see at that conference, or only see at a reading. So I'm looking forward to those in-person events. And I never thought I'd miss like a poetry reading at a really divey bar, but I can't wait to go to one of those again. So in those ways, it has changed a lot, but I hope it stays that there's some sort of multimodal component, so that if you're not in the area, you can still experience it in some kind of meaningful way. Because I think that is one of the positives we can take away from living through COVID.
Yeah. Good answer. So the next question you already did touch upon, because the next question is just, how have you experienced goodness in either your life or others? And you mentioned that, I just think is such a great point for this, your story of not really knowing where you wanted to be, and then accepting the opportunities and letting that path wind and weave its way. So that's a great example. Do you have any other stories you'd like to share about, a time like that when you weren't sure and it ended up working out great, or from a client success story, anything along those lines of just finding that goodness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of it comes down to being open and vulnerable with each other. I work with clients from a lot of different backgrounds, and what I find is they're all, and myself included, are trying to do the same thing of forming and forging sort of an unconventional path. Like I said, I did a 9 to 5 and I had like the worst personality for it. Like I thought I could just like do a 9 to 5 and do my creative stuff on the side. And it just didn't work out that way for me. And that's what I find with all of my clients, that there is this commonality. And I think it does take a certain amount of courage, but also self-awareness and vulnerability to be able to build your own business or write a self-help book or create courses for people who are on some kind of self-care journey, or you're wanting to grow their business. I think all of that is really important. And we have all of these personas on social media, and at the end of the day, what I find is like we're all just trying to figure it out. And there are things that I think people are great. I have a friend who's like great at doing Facebook Lives, and they actually like hate it and have to like really like jazz themselves up about it beforehand. And so it's like you just never know, and you never know how complicated somebody's life path has been. I never expected to be where I was, and I think just in terms of goodness, one of the something that's really stuck with me over the years was, like I said, I did write a little bit in high school. I remember my mom was a big fan of the mystery writer Sue Grafton, who I'm also a fan of. I hadn't read any of her books at the time, but we went to a reading and author signing when I was like 16. And so I had my notebook, and a lot of time I was like writing like really sad, really bad like song lyrics. Like I'm glad like I've erased them all from my brain and I don't have those journals anymore. But it was mostly that. And we were in the signing line, and Sue Grafton said, "Oh, are you a writer?" And I didn't know what to say. I was like, "Yeah, but like, I don't know like if I'm any good." And she's like, "Well, nobody really knows if they're any good." And that's like very simple advice, but something that's always stuck with me is like, nobody really knows if they're any good, but you know, that doesn't exempt you from not trying. Like you have to at least try and see. And I know she wrote her first book not really thinking it would get published or that it would go anywhere, and that she ended up writing 25 books before she died. So I just always think of that advice that she gave a very shy and anxious version of me, who's now a little less shy and a little less anxious. And that kindness and goodness has just stuck with me over the years. So I would say those are probably the main, just in the past, and then in my life now, working with clients where I see goodness coming forward, and just seeing people finding their own voice, whatever their business or their passion is.
You just not only answered that question, you answered my last question too in the most perfect way, which is what advice you find yourself thinking to yourself or giving to your clients. Mm-hmm. And I love what you just said about Sue. And nobody knows if we're any good, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yes. That's fantastic. I love that. Is there anything else you wanted to add though? I mean, I think that was just so beautifully put together, but if there's anything else you'd like to add.
You know, I think like in terms of like quotes, like I'm always somebody who's like writing down sayings and that sort of thing. But another one that I've picked up in like the past 5 years was a quote from Carrie Fisher, and it's you probably seen it on many an Etsy cross stitch, but it's "Stay afraid, but do it anyway." And she was one of the people, when I read her book, Wishful Drinking, I'm like, yeah, this is how I want to write. Like, this is like what I want to be like as a writer, and the way she was so open about mental health. And it's like, if your story isn't funny, it's just true. And like, that's unacceptable. It's like, you have to find, embrace the absurdity of the things that come at you. And again, like being afraid, it doesn't have to stop you from doing the things you love. And that's not to say it's not easy and that it isn't really scary and uncomfortable, and that I'm not still, there aren't times that I'm not scared or uncomfortable. Like that certainly happens, probably more than I would like, but that's another piece of advice that's always stuck with me. And Carrie Fisher is another writer who I've gone to again and again for inspiration, not just in my creative life, but just in life in general.
That's fantastic. And you all tying back to your great example of that, and everything is scary when it's not the conventional route.
Yeah,
and you went,
absolutely.
Well, keep that up, Patrick. That is inspiring to so many. And I think we're in a world now too, especially where being that multi-hyphenate is becoming more and more of, I don't want to say accepted. It's just becoming more and more popular because that's the way of the world. And I love hearing from someone else too, who just went for it and is finding that path, and the path goes like this. It doesn't go like this. So fantastic work, Patrick.
Thank you so much.